Good day, everyone. Welcome to our reading and writing skills class. Our topic for today is all about the different patterns of development. But before that, allow me to present to you the different objectives that you have to achieve at the end of the lesson. For sure, every one of you has experienced writing a paragraph, a short composition, or any writing projects assigned to you by your teachers. But the question is, how do you develop your ideas in writing? Are you familiar with the different patterns in writing? Can you name a few?
In writing, words, sentences, and paragraphs should be considered in order to organize one whole composition. This is where paragraph development comes into picture. There are lots of phases or patterns of paragraph development, including narration, description, definition, and classification, and others. In today's topic, we will just focus on narration and description as patterns of paragraph development. So let's discuss first about narration. What is narration? Narration is all about storytelling. It relates an incident or a series of events that leads to a conclusion or ending. It tells the readers when, where, and what happened. Narration is all about creating a world based on the writer's imagination. Narration is usually used in the humanities. In a writing class, for instance, you can write about a particular event or situation. A narrative is a story in a sequence of connected events. A narrative paragraph contains action words and transition words that indicate time or sequence. The following are some of the transition words used to signal time or sequence order. Let's take the sample paragraph on the next slide to better understand the elements that help in developing narration. Read the paragraph silently. Did you find the verbs and transition words? The narrative paragraph tells a part of a story in the first person. It shows a sequence of events connected by transition words like then, suddenly, at last, momentarily, and the next day. Also, action verbs like was walking, ran, fell, and all the other encircled words which are used to indicate movement. Some of these narrative techniques are plot structure, characters, point of view, setting, theme, and atmosphere. Are you familiar with this? Yes, these are just some of the elements of a narrative or short story. Aside from that, we could also use some narrative techniques in style, just like imagery, simile and metaphors, hyperboles, personification, and irony. Looks familiar, right? These are just some of the figurative languages that you have learned before. Aside from these narrative techniques, narrative devices could also be used. Here are some of the narrative devices that you can use in writing a narrative text. The first one is an anecdote. It is a brief narrative that is written from the writer's memory. It is usually a short narrative of an interesting, amusing, or biographical incident. The second one is flashback. It is an event that happened in the past, flashing back or quickly looking at something that had already happened. It is a general term for altering time sequences, taking the characters back into the beginning of the story. The opposite of this is flash forward. It is an event that has yet to happen in the story. It is all about flashing forward or quickly looking at something that will happen in the future. It temporarily jumps the narrative forward in time. The next one is time stretch. It is a single event in the story that the author focuses writing about. It is telling events that take longer. It is a telling of events that take longer than the events themselves. as if time slows down or events take more time to read about than they would to take place in reality. The opposite of this is time summary. It is characterized by jamming together multiple events and or shortening relatively long period of time, which is a single event that is prolonged or telling the events is shorter than the events themselves. Lastly is a dialogue. It is a word or series of words enclosed in a pair of quotation marks which signals the character's spoken language. That's all about narration. Aside from narration, one of the most common paragraph development that you usually use is description. What is description? It gives information of what a person, an object, a place, or a situation is like. It appeals to the reader's senses. It makes the reader see, hear, taste, smell, or feel the subject. Description gives information of what subject is based on what it is in a reader's mind. Literary analysis, descriptive essays, business plans, lab reports, and research papers are some examples of writing genres that use descriptive paragraphs. A descriptive paragraph has concrete and specific details which are carefully chosen by a writer to paint a picture in the mind of the reader. It is a pattern of development which goes into details about a specific object, person, or location in order to firmly set its appearance. It usually answers the questions, what does it look like, or what are its characteristics? There are different characteristics of description. The first one is, it has a clear focus and sense of purpose. Make sure that there should be very detailed observations, because the more details, the better the story. Next, it uses sensory details and precise words. The reader should be able to envision the picture that you had in mind as a writer. Third, it presents details in a logical order. Start at one point and move in one direction as not to confuse the reader. There are also different techniques in writing a descriptive paragraph. The first one is, choose a meaningful subject. Before you can write a great description, you must be extremely familiar with the subject of your description. You may do some researches or describe something that you really know or something that you are really familiar with. Next, make unique observations. The descriptive writer's first job is that of an observer. When observing your subject, look for the unseen and look for something that is not common to everyone. Next, engage the senses. You experience your word through an array of senses. All of those senses should be represented in your descriptive writing. Through the use of words, can they see, hear, taste, smell, or feel what you're talking about? It must appeal to their senses. Fourth, include figurative language. Good descriptive writing should feel poetic to the reader, even though it is written in prose. This is accomplished with the inclusion of well-placed bits of figurative language. A figurative language uses words or expressions to convey a meaning that is different from the literal interpretation, in order to convey a complicated meaning, colorful writing, clarity, or evocative comparison. Lastly, form a pattern. Ultimately, your goal as a descriptive writer is to recreate your subject inside your reader's mind. To do this, you will need a spatial pattern of how the subject is organized or designed. Make sure that it's easy to follow. There are two varieties of description. We have objective description and subjective description. In an objective description, this looks into factual and scientific characteristics of what is being described as objectively as possible. The writer stays away from emotional impressions or responses and describes the scene as it is. Read the paragraph silently and get ready to analyze on how the subject is being described. If you can see in the paragraph, the words highlighted in yellow gives the objective description of the subject since they tell about the size, height, color of its bark, and its leaves. The second variety of description is subjective. It is a sort of description that the author would normally use to paint the picture of how he sees a character or how he wants the reader to see a character. It is also used in literary discourse when there is a stereotype image that can be attributed to a person, place, or event. It uses emotional impression or responses. Once again, read the paragraph silently. Please take note of the subjective description that you can see in the paragraph. How poetic, right? Through the use of some words like a waterfall of ink, braid that fell to her slim waist, and plates shining like scales are just some of the figurative languages that make the statement more colorful. You may use some of the following signal words in developing a descriptive paragraph. Always remember that in writing, you have to think of the purpose to have a well-written text. The other patterns of development will be discussed next meeting. That's all for today. Bye!